before Doppler radar, before weather apps, before a single satellite circled the Earth. How did you know a monster storm was on its way? For thousands of years, humanity lived at the mercy of the skies. A sudden tempest or a violent hailstorm wasn't just an inconvenience that might cancel a picnic. It was a threat that could destroy your crops, scatter your livestock, and put your very existence on the line. Survival didn't depend on technology. It depended on paying attention. You didn't look at a screen. You looked at the living world around you. Ancient peoples, from Roman farmers to Native American tribes, knew a secret that we've all but forgotten. The strange behaviors of animals weren't random. They were a living, breathing early warning system. The sudden anxiety of a horse, a cat frantically hiding, a flock of birds flying dangerously low. These weren't just weird quirks. They were messages. This is the story of how our ancestors learned to listen when the animals spoke of the coming storm, a skill rooted in both ancient folklore and, as we're now discovering, some surprisingly cutting-edge science. The central thesis. For centuries, we've brushed these off as old wives' tales, a cat washing its ears to signal rain, a cow lying down as some kind of storm barometer. It sounds like simple superstition, a relic from a less enlightened time. But what if our ancestors were onto something profound? What if they weren't being mystical, but were instead master observers, tuned into their environment in a way we can barely comprehend today? We're going to explore the most enduring beliefs about animal weather watchers and see how they stack up against modern science. We'll dig into the folklore, look at the behaviors, and then uncover the incredible biological tools that let these creatures sense the world in ways we can't. You'll find that behind many of these ancient beliefs is a reality far more fascinating than fiction, a world of infrasound, barometric pressure sensors, and electromagnetic fields. This isn't about proving our ancestors were magical. It's about proving they were paying close attention. The sensitive giants, horses and cattle. Let's start on a windswept field in the Roman Empire, or maybe a medieval farmstead. Here, your most valuable assets aren't gold coins, but the powerful animals that plow your fields and carry your goods, your horses and cattle. Losing them to a sudden storm would be a catastrophe. So, you learn to watch them. You learn their language. Ancient farmers were the first to put it into words. When horses get inexplicably restless, snort a lot, or refuse to leave their stable, a storm is gathering. They might bunch together in a field with their tails turned to a specific direction, even when you can't feel a hint of wind. Proverbs also popped up about cattle, like the old European saying, "A cow with its tail to the east makes the weather least," suggesting they brace themselves against an incoming wind. To an ancient observer, this was just practical wisdom. To a modern scientist, it's a masterclass in animal senses. A horse's predictive power comes from senses far sharper than our own. First, their sensitivity to barometric pressure. A horse's large sinuses might be acutely sensitive to the small drops in air pressure that come before a storm. To us, it's nothing. To a horse, it can cause real discomfort, making it want to get to safety. But the even better explanation is their hearing. Horses, much like elephants, can detect infrasound, low-frequency sound waves that are totally silent to humans. A violent storm system churning up wind and thunder hundreds of miles away creates powerful infrasound waves. A horse's huge, mobile ears are like biological radar dishes, picking up the distant rumble of a storm long before any person could see a cloud or hear a whisper of thunder. They aren't predicting the future. They're hearing a version of the present that's completely silent to us. That's why they turn their tails to a wind that isn't there yet. They're bracing for a force they can already hear coming. The indoor oracle. Cats and dogs from the fields, let's head indoors, and even out to the high seas. For centuries, no animal has been tied more to weather superstitions than the house cat. Sailors, whose very lives depended on the weather, were especially keen observers. A calm, sleeping cat meant fair winds, but a cat that suddenly went wild, hid under things, or obsessively cleaned behind its ears was seen as a sure sign of rain and rough seas. They were so trusted they became known as gale warners on sailing ships. Dogs have their spot in weather lore, too. An old saying claims a dog eating grass means rain is coming, while others notice dogs getting anxious or whiny right before a storm. While the grass eating is probably just an upset stomach, that pre-storm anxiety is a very real thing that many pet owners today would recognize. So, is there any truth to these household oracles? Science points to a big yes. A cat's predictive ability likely comes from two things. First, just like horses, their inner ears are incredibly sensitive to drops in barometric pressure. A falling barometer can create a weird, uncomfortable feeling in their ear canals. That obsessive washing behind the ears? It might just be their attempt to make that feeling go away. Second, there's static electricity. The air gets charged with static right before a thunderstorm. A cat's fine fur picks up this charge, which can lead to unpleasant tingling or even tiny shocks when they rub against things. This would easily explain why a cat might suddenly act frantic or erratic. It's trying to escape an invisible irritation. Dogs share this sensitivity to air pressure, and they also have hearing that far outstrips our own, able to pick up the low rumbles of distant thunder. We can't. So when your dog starts whining at a clear blue sky, he might not be seeing ghosts. He might be hearing a storm that's still an hour away. The messengers of the sky. Birds of all animal forecasters, birds might be the most reliable. Across cultures, bird behavior has been one of humanity's most trusted weather signs. Native American traditions, for instance, paid close attention, knowing that birds flying low or flocking to shelter meant a storm was coming. Coastal people knew to worry when seagulls left the open water and huddled on the shore. An old English proverb says it all. Seagull, seagull, sit on the sand. It's never good weather when you're on the land. The sight of a sky suddenly empty of birds, or of flocks flying low and strange, is powerful and often eerie. This isn't just a myth. It's one of the most scientifically solid pieces of ancient weather lore. The reason is a mix of physics and biology. First, like many animals, birds are very sensitive to air pressure changes. A drop in pressure means the air is less dense. For a bird, flying in thinner air takes more work. It's like a swimmer trying to move through water that's suddenly less buoyant. So birds instinctively fly lower where the air pressure is a bit higher and flying is easier. They're also following their food. The same pressure drop often forces insects closer to the ground, and birds follow them down. But the most incredible explanation is, once again, infrasound. Birds can hear the low-frequency rumble of a distant storm from hundreds of miles away. This gives them a huge head start. A 2014 study found that golden-winged warblers fled their breeding grounds in Tennessee 1 to 2 days before a massive storm system arrived that was still over 500 miles away. They weren't waiting for the sky to darken. They were reacting to a sound that told them a huge weather event was on its way. The most powerful proof of this comes from the devastating 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. In the hours before the giant wave hit, observers reported a strange phenomenon, a mass exodus of birds. Flocks were seen flying frantically inland, leaving their coastal homes for no obvious reason. Scientists now believe they heard the tsunami coming. The undersea earthquake that triggered it generated massive infrasound waves that traveled through the ocean and air far faster than the wave itself. The birds heard the disaster long before anyone saw it, offering a chilling, real-world validation of the ancient wisdom that told us to watch the skies. The unseen collective, insects and amphibians. While big animals gave big clues, our ancestors knew that some of the best weather information came from the smallest creatures. They knew you also had to watch the ground beneath your feet. Across cultures, people watched ants. If ants marched in straight lines or frantically built up the rims of their anthills, it was a sure sign of rain. Bees were another key indicator. If they suddenly vanished from the flowers and returned to the hive, you knew a storm was near. And then there were the frogs. All across Europe, loud, sustained croaking was a sign of coming rain. Some people even made homemade barometers by keeping a frog in a jar with a tiny ladder, believing it would climb up for good weather and stay low for a storm. Leeches in jars were also watched, as they'd get agitated and try to climb out of the water when low pressure approached. These aren't just quaint stories. The science here is remarkably solid. Ants have incredibly sensitive antennae that can detect tiny changes in humidity and temperature, spurring them to protect their colonies from a coming downpour. For bees, it's even more simple. Rain makes flight difficult, so returning to the hive is just common sense. Frogs, with their permeable skin, are very sensitive to humidity. That loud croaking is often a mating call, triggered by the damp, favorable conditions that arrive just before the rain. Perhaps the most stunning modern example of this comes from a 2009 earthquake in L'Aquila, Italy. A biologist studying a toad population at a lake 46 miles from the epicenter noticed something astonishing. 5 days before the 6.3 magnitude quake hit, 96% of the male toads in the colony completely vanished. The leading theory is that stressed rocks deep in the earth released charged particles and gases into the water. The toads, living in that water, sensed this toxic change and fled. It's a profound modern echo of ancient wisdom, proving that even the humblest creatures can detect powerful invisible forces. The folklore debunked and re-examined. Now, we have to talk about the most famous piece of weather lore of all. If cows are lying down, it's about to rain. It's so ingrained in our culture that people still swear by it, and the theories seem plausible enough. Maybe cows sense the humidity and lie down to keep a patch of grass dry for later. Or maybe the drop in air pressure messes with their stomachs. But this is where we separate correlation from causation. After a lot of study, the scientific consensus is that this one is largely a myth. Cows lie down for lots of reasons. They're chewing their cud, they're tired, or they're just resting. They spend about half their day lying down, regardless of the weather. A field of resting cows is just as likely to get rained on as a field of standing ones. This is an important lesson. It shows our ancestors weren't infallible. Some folklore was based on coincidence. But it also strengthens the other examples. By being able to identify and debunk the myths, we gain more confidence in the beliefs that really are rooted in science. But there's a deeper point. The mistake of the cow myth is looking for a single magical sign. An ancient observer wouldn't just see a cow lying down. They'd see the cow lying down, notice the birds are flying low, feel the stillness where the bees used to be, and see their horse pawing nervously at the ground. It was never about one piece of data. It was about seeing a pattern, a symphony of cues that, together, painted a clear picture of the coming storm. They were reading the whole language of nature, not just a single word. The lost art of observation. So, can animals predict the weather? The answer is nuanced and fascinating. They aren't psychic. They don't predict the future like a meteorologist does. What they do is react to the present. They are living, breathing barometers, infrasound detectors, and humidity sensors. Their survival has always depended on being tuned to the subtle, invisible signals our technology-cocooned senses have forgotten how to read. The ancients who watched these animals were not superstitious. They were scientists in their own right, practicing a kind of biological meteorology. They gathered data, they saw patterns, and they made deductions that saved their lives. They knew the world was constantly communicating. They had simply learned its language. Today we have satellites that can see a hurricane from space and computers that can model weather days out. We've undeniably mastered the big picture, but in our reliance on screens, we may have lost something precious. We've lost the intimate connection to the living world, the ability to read the subtle shift in a horse's mood or the flight path of a bird. The story of animals and the weather is a reminder that there is a deep wisdom embedded in nature, waiting for anyone patient enough to stop, look, and listen. Call to action. People have been watching animals for thousands of years, and the stories are endless. We want to hear yours. Have you ever seen your own pets, your dog, cat, or bird, acting strangely right before a big storm or some other event? Share your story in the comments. Let's rebuild this ancient library of observation together.